Hello and welcome to Morning Call, your tech news for the day. We have Thursday, the 28th of March, 2019. I'm Fab from Hamburg, and as usually, I'll be bringing you some tech news today. Some stuff that is important today, might be important tomorrow. And let's start with something. Yesterday, I talked a lot about the EU copyright reform that was passed in the European Parliament, and I had mentioned a member of the European Pirate Party, the member of the German Pirate Party, the only member of the European Parliament that from that party, Julia Reda, who has distinguished herself recently fighting against the EU copyright reform. And yesterday, she put out a video where she's explaining why you shouldn't vote for the Pirate Party. She has left the Pirate Party, and she's saying she's getting a lot of questions. There's a EU election coming up very soon, and people have now seen the parties pass this copyright law. Who should I basically vote for to punish them? And she's saying, do not vote for the Pirate Party. This is something you don't see very often. A member of parliament of a party. I mean, you see them quitting parties, but generally just blanketly saying that you shouldn't vote for the party is pretty unique. She's doing this in a very impassioned video, very heartfelt video, where she's saying that her former office, the head of her office in the European Parliament, a guy called Gilles Bordelais, he was running her office, and apparently he was sexually abusing or assaulting people, and he has, there was some claims against him as for this, and basically she's saying she's investigated this. She's last year she's thrown him out of her office. She couldn't fire him because he's hired by the parliament, but she went to the institution there, the HR institution for the parliament basically, and said, I want this guy fired. He's being investigated for sexual assault or abuses and for bullying, and she and they were actually investigating it. And her problem was she's saying like her fight was against this copyright reform was significantly hindered by this, because she had to basically she couldn't fire the guy, but she didn't want to have him be in her office because obviously he assaulted other people there, and then she had to basically he wasn't coming to work anymore. But she also couldn't replace him because he wasn't fired. So she was down one person. And so now these investigations have been substantiated. Apparently he's he's that at least one case there. Sorry. Ooh. Need more coffee. One case there has been substantiated, and he's been I mean, she's being removed from her office. But the problem here is, and she wrote about this earlier this month, that he basically, so she went to the Pirate Party and said we can't, like, he was in the list for the next election. She was on the first place, he was on second place, and she was saying, like, we can't have him on this list, and they said, basically agreed with her, and he pretended to step down. So apparently it works like this: you submit, if you put yourself forward for the election, you kind of, you submit your papers. You have to submit your papers to the German office that's organizing the election, like in Germany, as part of the European election. And he was saying, well, basically, I'm not going to stand for this election. And apparently, the Pirate Party governing body was kind of like, okay, if he doesn't submit his papers, he's not going to be on the list. But he apparently tricked them, went around behind their back, submitted his paper, and now he's on the list, and they can't get him off the list anymore, because that's just how it works. So she's quit. If you're German, if you're interested in this, I would urge you to watch this video. This is a very good video. She's doing something very courageous there, I think. So she's quit the Pirate Party, and she's saying vote for any of the other parties that she actually mentions, Die Partei as well, that have fought against this copyright reform, but don't vote for the Pirate Party, which is a very, as I said, something you don't see very often. I just wanted to report on that because she's done a very good job, I think. I'm historically not a fan of the Pirate Party, pretty much for reasons like this. But I hope she can continue. She can go to another party or be independent or whatever, and continue to fight for stuff. So that much for the European copyright reform aftershocks. We also have the news. The Verge is writing about Apple. I was talking about Apple News, and them obviously launching this app for magazines and news. And Apple is apparently breaking its own rules by advertising this. They sent out a push notification to advertise this, and apparently that is forbidden by its own developer guidelines. It's also forbidden the way you subscribe in the magazine is you push a button that says try it free, and then you get the confirmation button where from the Apple Store, where you basically have to put in your credentials or your fingerprint, whatever, and on there it says 1 month trial free and then $9.99 a month. But Apple's own developer guidelines say if you are doing something like this, you basically have to have a big button that very prominently indicates the amount you will be paying for this subscription, even if it's free for a month. So Apple is kind of like violating its own guidelines. It's, I guess, not a surprise, but still, I think it's good that the Verge is reporting on this. And I hate hypocrisy like this. I think that's stupid. Apparently, Apple has done this, sending out sending out the push notifications advertising before. They promoted Apple Music that way. They promoted Carpool Karaoke, which I guess was one of their its own like TV kind of show that they had in their app. And even, I mean, I think this is concerning the fact that if you have an app and you tell it, okay, I have if you make an app, somebody installs it and then says, yes, you have this question on iOS, are they allowed to send me push notifications? And if you say yes, I guess you are okay to like promote your content from that app. But if you've never used the iPhone TV app, I mean, it's pre-installed, yes, but like, you haven't indicated with everything else. You have to actively indicate that you care about that app and you want notifications, and Apple's just doing it. Also, they have also done it later to promote Apple Music on Amazon Echo apparently. Yeah, so Apple breaking its own rules. Not good. Not good. I mean, you can see the argument from developers like, why should I care about your rules if you're not if you're not caring about them yourself. Reporting again on the 737 MAX. As I've said, I'm going to keep up on this story. Boeing has finished the software update, and they could push it to the planes now, but it needs to go through certification with the FAA before they can do that, but it would be ready. Now, interestingly, I mean, this what this basically does. I listened to a very good episode of The Daily recently, which is the New York Times podcast. And they have a very good episode on this Boeing 737 thing, and basically the big criticism here is that so after the first crash, the Lion Air crash, it was already pilots were already I guess suspecting that this MCAS system was like that there was a problem, and Boeing had basically never told pilots that this system even existed. What they basically did was, okay, we changed the characteristics of the plane by changing this, like changing the engines, and what we're doing is we're basically deploying a software system that will like quietly change the flight behavior of the plane so that the pilot will never notice that this plane handles any different than any other 737. And so the pilots after the first crash were actually saying to like pilot organizations are basically telling Boeing that this is like a breach of trust. You should have told us this system existed. But they weren't opting like for training for all the pilots, because they were saying, okay, now we know this, and now we can handle this problem with confidence not happening again. Because basically what was happening during the first crash was this system was counteracting the pilots' inputs, and because they didn't know the system existed, they didn't turn it off. They could have turned it off, but they didn't know. And then pilots were saying, okay, now we know this MCAS system exists, and we can deal with this. Now, fast forward a bit after the Ethiopian crash, where it looks like those pilots didn't know about the system. And now it's become very clear that Boeing should have really told everybody about this. And I mean, this is what the security update, this update is doing as well. It's basically, all the indicators, they don't have to like screw in a new bulb in the cockpit anymore. They're all like digital indicators, and they're just putting a new indicator in that says, basically MCAS has been activated, or like we are currently getting different readings from the two angle of attack sensors, and then the pilot can go, like if the plane keeps pitching down for some reason, and he tries to pull up and sees that light is on, he can just turn MCAS off and then solve the problem. But now the thing that is interesting in this new report here today as well is that Boeing is also saying they want additional training for pilots. And the whole story that they worked out in this in the Daily as well is that Boeing did all this and basically allegedly never told anybody about the system because they didn't want additional training. Because had they basically said, okay, this plane is significantly different from any other 737, then airlines who use this new plane, the MAX version basically, would have had to do expensive simulator training, which costs them millions if it's a big airline. And so in this case, Boeing just wanted to avoid this and said, well, there's no significant no change. It's not a new plane model. It's the same model. It's like a little bit different engines. I mean, it's like the Airbus, the Airbus 320, which prompted this whole development by by Boeing. They put out a version 320 Neo, new engine option, which is the same plane just with different engines. But because the 320 is a modern plane, whereas the 737 is basically from the 50s, these new engines, like the way the engines are mounted on the 320, are just different. And this new engine option doesn't change the flight characteristics. Whereas in the 737 MAX, they had to significantly change how the engines are mounted, and this changed the flight characteristics. And because they wanted to compete with Airbus, and that included, hey, no additional training because the 320 Neo doesn't require additional training, this whole thing happens. ASCII says Mentor Pilot has a great video about how MCAS works on YouTube. Okay, I'll look into that. That looks actually interesting. Yeah, so that's this whole thing. Now we have a security update. But I don't know. I'm guessing a lot of passengers have lost trust in the 737 MAX. I'm not sure they can just deploy that software update and people will fly that thing readily again. We will see. Speaking of security, some researchers have found 36 new security vulnerabilities in LTE. There are 31 security distinct problems, 51 vulnerabilities actually. And if you attack this, you can spoof SMS messages, you can kick people out of the network, and stuff like this. But you have to, or you can manipulate connections actually. But to do this, for a lot of these attacks, you need to basically create a rogue cell, with your own basically cell tower. So this is not an attack just anybody can do, which is good. But on the other hand, I mean, these rogue cell towers, that's exactly what what are these things called? Stingrays, those basically law enforcement uses to entrap criminals. What they basically do is they'll have their own equipment, and they'll basically like a mobile equipment, and they'll basically set up what to the phone looks like a cell tower. And because it's closer than the actual cell tower, the phone's like, okay, yeah, the signal here is stronger, connects with this, and then you can actually attack the connections. And so we find that GSM we knew had a lot of vulnerabilities, but people find more and more in LTE as well. So I guess these are new vulnerabilities that law enforcement level, intelligence service level attackers will then use. The Register is currently reporting, this is an interesting story, on a bit of a blast from the past. Back in 2011, HP bought a UK software company called Autonomy for $11 billion. And then had to write down the value of Autonomy by 8.8 billion. And this was hugely embarrassing for HP. And now HPE, which inherited this, is suing the makers of Autonomy in the Crown Court in the UK. And this court case is just kicked off. And basically, I think they're suing them for $5 billion in damages because they are saying they inflated their company worth, and then we paid way too much for it, and they did that. So they could make more money. Now, interesting is in this court case, there's lots of papers coming out, of course, in discovery, and so as the register says, HP deployed Truth Squad in post-autonomy PR blitz to defend Meg Whitman, CEO of HP at the time, and it's just interesting if you're interested in this. It's an interesting read, the story on the register, because it basically shows how HP, how PR tactics work of companies. How they try to spin narrative with journalists, and basically try to defend this $8.8 billion write down, very embarrassing, and then, created a narrative that sounds better. So, as the register says, in a key part of the document focused on media spin, HP told its internal mouthpieces to protect the HP turnaround narrative, aggressively work with reporters to break down and explain complex aspects of the write-down news, create 2 coverage streams with a focus on earnings if possible. And also, apparently, they directly called the UK Prime Minister, David Cameron, at the time, and the then Chancellor George Osborne. Very interesting stuff. In other news from this court case, the defendant, the lawyer for the defendant, is saying basically, no, they didn't inflate the price. Basically, what happens is HP bought them and then quickly drove the business into the ground, which is why it's not valued more. Interesting story, especially if you were in tech news back in the day. That was a big story and very embarrassing for HP back then. We got another security story. Nvidia is reporting, or it has issued an update for Nvidia GeForce Experience, which is the little program some people are using. You don't have to, but some people are using to manage drivers. It's the Nvidia program for GeForce graphics cards. You can also use it to record gameplay footage and stream gameplay footage, and that is where this vulnerability comes in. If somebody gets access, so they're saying Nvidia GeForce Experience contains a vulnerability when shadow play or game stream is enabled. Shadow play is this recording game footage. When an attacker has access to the system and creates a hard link, the software does not check for hard link attacks. This behavior may lead to code execution, denial of service, or escalation of privileges. So I guess update your GeForce Experience. It's hated by gamers quite a lot, but also the shadow play stuff is really it's really handy. If you have a GeForce graphics card, it basically uses very, very little system resources to record video, and you can continuously record, and then it always basically keeps the last 5 minutes, so you can go back and say, you can pause in the game and say, oh, that thing that happened 2 minutes ago, I want the video of that. So that's why many people, including me, use it. Some bad news from the gaming industry. EA is laying off 350 people. Looks like they're not developers. Looks like it's the marketing, publishing, and adjacent stuff. And they are mostly in Eastern Europe, I guess. In Russia and Japan. They're closing offices. And this is sad news, especially considering EA is making massive profits, aren't they? It's not like they're in dire straits. They're just raking it in, especially with FIFA and Madden. They have a hit game out right now, Apex Legends. But they're still laying off the people. Always goes down. Always. Shit always flows downstream, doesn't it? And that's pretty much it for today. I have one last story from Germany, which I found interesting. So the banking startup N26, if you're in Germany, you will have seen the advertising. They're like a fintech thing. They're like the hero of the German startup scene right now. Massive valuation. They're basically banking, a bit like Revolut, like modern. Style themselves a modern bank, but apparently they have problems. So this is a Gründerszene reporting on a business customer who tried to log into his banking, into his account one day, and it didn't work. And he couldn't contact anybody because they don't have phone support anymore. And it basically took 2 weeks for the support guys to actually address his case, and he was like, I can't log in, I can't get to my money. And they were like, there's nothing you used to have 80,000 euros in your account. Now there's 12 euros 26 left. And he was like, what? And yeah, they were saying, contact the police. And apparently this is not the only case. He was probably attacked by phishing. Yeah, Reem says that's not the first problem they had, if I can remember correctly. Yes, their security has had issues in the past. And I guess this is just normal phishing attack. Usually, this happens to normal banks as well, but usually they're very quickly on the case. And if they can't, if the bank can't demonstrate gross negligence, like on the part of the customer, they actually have to give you your money back. In this case, they didn't. Well, at least until this report came out, and then he got all his money back. They're also talking about another case they have reports on, and this guy he's like a self-employed guy. He's he sells like I think toys or something, and he couldn't pay his the manufacturers that manufacture stuff for him, and some of them have now jumped ship because they were like, oh, this guy can't pay us. And yeah, pretty bad. And also, I'm looking into this currently a little bit. It looks like their security system is really weird, where they have like push 10 to the same app that you do your banking with, and it's. Normally with phishing, this thing is kind of hard to pull off because even if you get access to the account, you will still need like the guy. Basically, if you request a transfer, then you will need a TAN number, and you only get that, like usually that's pushed to a mobile phone or something like this, so you need access to that. That's kind of hard. But if it's on the same app, then you can just own, like the guy when he's using his phone, own that account, and then you can transfer money as well. Yeah, I just wanted to mention this because there's a lot of advertising for this for the bank, and maybe you want to be aware of that. And as not only Reem says, there's lots of people when the story came out, there's lots of people reporting similar problems. And only like even if your money doesn't get stolen, the fact that he like had to wait 2 weeks, a bank needs even if they don't have telephone customer service. I'd be generally okay with that. But they need to react quicker. And then if 80,000 euros get stolen, I would like to talk to somebody in person, to be honest. Just telling somebody to go to the police is not really enough. Anyway, that's it for me for today. That's all of the tech news. I'll be back with another show tomorrow. And then next week, I'll take some time off. There won't be any shows in the beginning of next week. I think I'm gonna take a bit of holiday and go to the beach or something. And I will miss April the 1st, which is a good, 2 birds with 1 stone, basically. Anyway, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you again tomorrow with more tech news. Until then, keep your banking secure